All right, so I hope everyone's doing well. My name's Zeo Quinones. I'm one of the managers for the Personal Finance Manager project, and today we're going to be doing our milestone 2 presentation. I'm going to be presenting some updates to the application, some progress that we've made, and overall just some general housekeeping. So, first of all, let's talk about what the app initially was set out to do, which was budgeting your finances, tracking your financial behavior, interacting through any device. So, in other words, making a user friendly and user viable application that any user can use in any device that they wish in order to manage their finance and help them stay on track with any financial goals or any financial literacy that they may be having issues with. Right? Top of that, in order to achieve that, we need to have a high degree of data visualization, and in order to communicate to the user how they're doing financially. And in order to do that, we need to be able to track the user. And in order to do that, the user has to be able to use this in any device in a way that it's easy and intuitive for him in order for us to be able to collect the data that we need from the user. Right. So originally during our first milestone, we had a bare bones website up and running. We could input some data, we could see some very basic data visualization, and we had a login page for Google, Facebook, or a regular old login page. We were storing things in plain text. Overall, it was a very bare bones application, if you will. Right. So for this second milestone, our features were as follows. We improved our sign in and login by making it properly work, properly storing and hashing user passwords using a same database, that being Firebase. On top of that, we added a calendar system in order for the user to be able to have a way to anchor his purchases and his budgets relative to time, so the user could visualize that in certain weeks he expects to spend, I don't know, $200 as a recurring purchases on a week, or that last week he can see via the calendar that he spent a little extra on, say, utilities. On top of that, bonus to the calendar, we also improved the structure of our page to make it more user friendly. It's a very big keyword in this presentation. A lot of the things that we did during this milestone were for that sole focus of making the application more user friendly, more usable, more nice to look at, prettier for the eyes for everyone involved. Right. So, as mentioned previously, analyzing data is a very integral part of what we're doing here. So, in order to accomplish that, we use several algorithms in order to properly analyze and determine whether or not our user is staying on track. And obviously, we improve some of the visualization of that analysis in order to communicate it to the user. Right. So, we ended up subdividing into three teams for this, which wound up being data analysis, the calendar system, a page structure, and a documentation team on the side to help us stay on task and manage everything. So, doing a little rundown here, our data analysis team, as the name suggests, was in charge of looking at all the data that was collected that the user provides and finding trends in that data in order to correlate that data to match, say, certain parameters that the user set in order to see how the user's financials are gonna be expanding or decreasing into the future. Their job was just to find patterns uh, to help the user see where his finances are heading. Then we have the calendar system, which was a feature I explained earlier. The sole purpose of the calendar is just to help the user visualize in a time sensitive manner all of his finances. Then we have the page structure, which we're in charge of, as mentioned previously, just making the website prettier on the eyes, right? And then we have the documentation team, which obviously is part of our requirements. We need to have everything well documented so the future work isn't slowed down by our lack of foresight at the current moment. Okay, so we distributed our team of 28. We had an equal distribution of, I believe, 8 developers in calendar page and data analysis. And then we had, I believe, 4 members in documentation. Um, you believe that this was ideal since the three main feature sets could be worked on independently. So we had a team leader for each of those. And then we had the documentation team on the side in order to help the team leader and the teams organize themselves with the documentation. Right. So on top of that, part of the distribution methodology that we use was team leaders because it's an easier way for the managers to be able to communicate and relay information onto the developers. Right, so let's talk a bit more about the calendar system. We glanced over it earlier. pretty much this is the same thing as the calendar on your phone. It gives the user the ability to add notes to the calendar, but these notes are in a sense more of a financial note, like saying on the 5th of July I spent $200, or on the 10th of July I plan to spend $50 on non-essential goods. Right. This again, it's part of the visualization because we're trying to communicate to the user what exactly is happening. And we have the data analysis team, as mentioned previously. They're just trying to find correlation in the data, trying to find patterns in our data in order to better help the user understand. Then we have our page structure, which, like we said, sole purpose is just to make things prettier. That means cleaning up some of the code, making things more homogeneous, allowing the website to checking the website on certain devices, making sure that the website is symmetrical, making sure that our website manages all sorts of inputs correctly and doesn't just have a seizure and decide to display things incorrectly. Right. So part of what we talked about before, the division, we've decided to adopt an agile development where we have our weekly meetings on Fridays. We have scrum meetings, and we have individual team meetings with their managers. Then we have leader meetings, which consist mostly of leaders and the managers communicating with each other what needs to be done, not exactly the how it's going to be done. Then we have our sprints, which is just this week X thing needs to happen, so X thing will happen. What do you need for that thing to happen? And obviously the GitHub tools, which we have to use in order to get our points, which basically boils down to knowing how to use issues, knowing how to use projects, etc., etc. So going a little bit into the implementation, there's not a lot to say here. For our front end, we use JavaScript. For our back end, we use Firebase, but the code for the Firebase is basically JavaScript, so it's all JavaScript at the end of the day. It's the web after all. So we've started adopting Next.js, which is just, as my very insightful slide can show, we have React.js plus serverless gives us Next.js. In other words, Next.js is just React, but we can execute the code on the server side. So here's a little bit of insight into what was happening. This was our old main page, and here's our current main page. As you can see, we took a Batman approach and just made everything black. Obviously, there's more to it than that. Overall, the page looks much more homogeneous, as stated previously. It has nicer colors. Make sure that our monkey brain knows what exactly we're allowed to push, what we're not allowed to push, it's overall more intuitive if we compare the two. Obviously, this first page looks like it came straight out of the 1990s, and then our second page looks more modern. But obviously, this boils down to personal taste. And when you're trying to make a page, you're trying to make the page that is good enough for most people, since obviously this is more of a personal thing. Right, so let's see a little demo about how we would first sign up and log into our application. So as you can see, fairly straightforward process. Uh, Same thing as any other online service: name, email address, password, mobile phone number, date of birth, and obviously you send that up to our database. We store it in a secure manner. Obviously, it involves a lot of hashing, but those are just details. Right, we also have another way to sign in, which would be the less traditional way, which would just be using Google Auth to sign in, which in other words means just using your Google account, and your Google account stores the credentials for accessing the application. Some people argue that's more secure, other people argue that it's not. Anyways, that's just semantics. Moving on. Let's talk about our backend a little bit. Like I mentioned previously, we use Firebase in order to host the actual backend of our services, which is where we store the user data, which is pretty much where all the reads and writes are going to anytime you're accessing the application. So here we can see some general data. We can see our writes and we can see our reads. Obviously, some more reads than writes since we're still in development. But obviously, one thing to consider when you're going serverless is obviously cost and scalability. Because right now we're working with free tier. One thing to consider is that that free tier has limits, which actually that brings me to one of our bigger issues earlier on, which was that a lot of developments, anytime that we had bugs, we didn't have any checks put in. So if we had a bug that made the 500 requests, then those would be the 500 requests for the day, and then we would eventually time out, which is just one thing to keep in mind when you're going and you're going to be using serverless computing. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the encryption. For encryption, we decided to adopt the symmetric encryption algorithm simply for its simplicity. KISS, keep it simple, stupid. The idea is the simpler it is, the less security holes it's going to have. Therefore, the easier it is to manage. So the way that it works is that we are going to be storing an encrypted blob of the user's data, which we ourselves, as in not the developers, not the admins, not anyone can read. And that blob is when the user first signs in, be that through cookies or an initial first sign in, gets sent to the user, and the user has to provide a password to decrypt that data in order for the web application to be able to process that data and generate all the previously mentioned features, which would be visualization, etc., etc. Uh, In other words, it's just the regular old encryption on your file system, but pretty much we store the encrypted file. This is arguably one of the more secure ways to do this because the only real point of failure here would be the user password, and in that case, it's not my fault as a developer or as an admin because it's on you to have a decent password. All I'm doing is providing for you a way to store the actual encrypted blob, which is then transported from the database onto your computer. Obviously, one thing to keep in mind is obviously autosaves because before you can send that data onto the database, you have to re-encrypt it, and that carries with itself another set of complications. For example, how are you going to store the password? Are you going to prompt the password for every time you want to auto save the data and send it back to the database, or are you not going to auto save and you're going to have to make sure that the user knows that he has to sign out manually in order for the data to sync? Well, those are all again semantics for the next milestone, which I'm sure I'll be discussing with you all. Here we go about the data analysis. Here we have some simple table, keep it simple, stupid, that allows us to see our spending, the mean, median, and mode. Simple things you learn in statistics for engineers, unfortunately. Page structure, make it cleaner, make it more modern, as mentioned previously. Calendar system, mentioned previously, nice modern calendar. I can add the stuff that I would like to add, what dates I'm getting money, what dates I'm losing money, etc. So let's talk about the future. Future's always coming. So pretty much as a whole, the web application is mostly finished. Obviously, it's going to be finished, but it's more whole than the previous milestone. So pretty much all that's left is just improving the code that's already there, making sure that we test the code properly, and just make the cohesive experience even more cohesive, become one with the application, if you will. So I'm gonna leave it out to my fellow manager to do a full demo with you guys. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Cesar. I'm the other manager of the personal finance manager team. I'm just going to do a quick demo of the app so far, and for that I'm going to authenticate with my university email, and you can see that there's some balance in here and there's some negative numbers, so maybe I will want to put some incomes from my paycheck. So I will put $400 from my paycheck, and it's logged to be today. So when I put entry, well, it updates my balance. So maybe I will want to spend some of my money in a video game. Let's say a Nintendo video game that cost me $60. So I just going to pick that category, choose it, and it already updated my balance. And some of the features that you can see in the app is that it shows you some analysis from the mean, median, and mode from daily and weekly and monthly data, as also the expenses. And if I scroll down, you can also see the different graph that the team has made, and also the calendar system that we can put some events. Let's say, a 8 at McDonald's. So I'm just going to put the money that it cost me my McDonald's meal, submit it, and as you can see, it has been logged in on the event. And also I can choose from different types of modes that are available, and it shows you the current date that you are in. There's also some menus, and overall, this is like the main page and some of the things that the team has worked on. So thank you very much for listening to our presentation, and I hope that everyone has a great day.